J.C. Lee Dugard was walking up the hill toward her school bus stop on a quiet California morning, the kind of morning that felt safe because it was all she had ever known. She was thinking about her favorite pink jacket and the field trip her class was planning when a strange car slowed down beside her. She hesitated, expecting it to pass, but the window slid down and a man's eyes locked on her with unsettling intensity. Before she could step back, a woman inside the car opened the door, and in one swift movement, J.C. felt a shock run through her body. Her world blurred as she tried to scream, but the sound never made it to the air. She felt her feet leave the ground, felt hands dragging her into the vehicle as the door slammed behind her. Panic clawed at her chest while she drifted between consciousness and numbness, unsure if she was dreaming or trapped inside someone else's nightmare. The man in the driver's seat muttered to himself rapidly, switching between anger and excitement, his voice rising and falling like he was arguing with invisible people. The woman beside J.C. avoided eye contact completely, as if she couldn't bear to acknowledge what she was part of. As the car sped away, J.C. watched the world she knew shrink in the side mirror until it disappeared entirely. When J.C. woke again, she was in a backyard surrounded by high fences and cluttered sheds. Her small hands trembled as she touched the rough ground beneath her and tried to piece together what had happened. The man introduced himself as Philip and said she had to follow rules if she wanted to stay alive. His tone was calm, but carried an edge that told her he enjoyed control. He led her to a small tent-like structure hidden behind debris, a place barely big enough to breathe in. The air smelled of mold and chemicals, and the faint buzz of insects filled the silence around her. Days blended into one another as J.C. tried to understand her new reality. She waited for someone to find her, waited for her mother's voice to break through the barriers and pull her home, but the fences were too tall and the house too quiet. Philip visited often, sometimes talking nonstop about visions and missions he believed were given to him, other times muttering that the world was watching him. His unpredictability kept J.C. constantly alert. She learned quickly that survival depended on reading his mood before he even said a word. Any mistake could turn a calm moment violent. J.C. realized she could not fight him physically. He was stronger, bigger, and fueled by delusions she could not predict. Instead, she began studying him, his habits, his routines, the way he paced when he was nervous and smiled strangely when he felt powerful. She listened carefully whenever he rambled, because somewhere in his chaotic speech she could find patterns. She learned that if she appeared agreeable, he relaxed. If she seemed scared, he felt stronger. It became a dangerous psychological game where her life depended on playing the role he needed to see. The backyard compound soon expanded into a maze of tents and sheds, an entire world invisible from the outside. J.C. was cut off from sunlight, friends, and every piece of life she once knew. But she held on to one thing her captor could not reach, her mind. She practiced staying calm even when she felt like breaking. She whispered memories of home to herself at night, reminding her brain that she was more than what was happening to her. Even when Philip tried to erase her identity, taking away her name and giving her a new one, she repeated her real name silently, so it would never disappear. Years passed with J.C., trapped behind the layers of control Philip built. She learned that the woman who had helped kidnap her, Nancy, was as involved as he was, though she often pretended to be kind to justify her actions. The couple kept J.C. hidden like a secret, terrified the world would discover their crimes. J.C. endured periods of fear, so intense her body shook without warning, but she kept her mind steady. She discovered that showing submission made them more careless. When she nodded at Philip's impossible ideas, he believed she admired him. When she complimented Nancy's small attempts at kindness, Nancy softened and left her unattended longer. J.C. lived through seasons behind the backyard walls, hearing fireworks on holidays, laughter from neighbors, and cars passing nearby. Sounds of a world moving on without her. She longed to run toward them, but had no door to escape through, no place to hide if she made it out. Her survival depended on patience, and patience required strength she never knew she had. Even the darkest nights couldn't erase the hope that somewhere, someday, she would step outside those walls again. When children entered her life inside captivity, her world became more complicated and more fragile. She realized she could not crumble now. Two small lives depended on her. She raised them in secrecy, teaching them to stay quiet, teaching them how to survive Philip's moods, teaching them as much normalcy as she could create in a place designed to break spirits. They became her reason to keep fighting silently. She told them stories of the world outside, careful not to awaken Philip's paranoia, but enough to plant a seed of freedom in their hearts. Philip's behavior grew more erratic over time, his rambling speeches turning into full conversations with imaginary voices. JC understood that every unstable moment increased the chance of exposure, if only she could guide him toward a situation he couldn't control. She noticed he desperately wanted validation, wanted others to believe he was important or enlightened. She used this weakness carefully, suggesting ideas in ways that made him think he came up with them. Each word she spoke was calculated, each reaction measured. She was no longer merely surviving. She was manipulating the cracks in his delusional world. The opportunity came when Philip insisted on involving the outside world in a project he believed he was destined to lead. He wanted approval from someone with authority, someone who would confirm his imagined greatness. JC encouraged him subtly, knowing the more he interacted outside, the higher the chance someone would sense something wrong. She remained calm, hiding her anxiety behind a mask she had perfected over 18 years. Even when he took her and the girls to public places under strict control, she acted composed, knowing panic could destroy everything. One day, Philip brought them to a university campus where he tried seeking attention from officers present. JC stood quietly behind him, her heart racing at the sight of uniforms, badges, and people who lived freely. She noticed the way the officers watched Philip, the confusion in their eyes, the suspicion forming as he rambled about missions and destinies. JC answered questions carefully, balancing the fine line between obedience and honesty. Her voice was steady, but her heartbeat felt like thunder in her ears. She sensed something shifting, something she had waited nearly 2 decades for. The officers couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. A routine follow-up was scheduled, and Philip, thinking he impressed them, agreed. JC remained calm as they returned home, hiding the storm inside her chest. She didn't show excitement, didn't let Philip see the flicker of hope rising inside her. She knew one wrong reaction could make him panic and tighten his control again. Instead, she acted the same way she had for years, quiet, agreeable, invisible. But inside, she prepared for the moment she had dreamed of since she was 11. When Philip was questioned again by authorities, his story began to fall apart. His inconsistencies drew deeper suspicion, and eventually, officers requested to speak to JC privately. For the first time in 18 years, she was asked a simple question with enormous weight. "Who are you?" She felt her throat tighten, tears pressing behind her eyes, but she forced herself to breathe steadily. After nearly 2 decades of silence, she whispered her real name. At that moment, the world she had been stolen from cracked open. The officers stared at her in disbelief, realizing the girl who vanished all those years ago had been standing in front of them disguised as someone else's shadow. Shock rippled through the room as JC continued speaking, her voice trembling but determined. She explained fragments of her imprisonment, choosing her words carefully, still afraid Philip might storm in at any second. But this time was different. This time she wasn't behind walls. She wasn't alone. She was being heard. The news reached her family before she could fully grasp what was happening. The mother who had searched endlessly, who had lived with hope battling grief, was finally told her daughter was alive. JC felt a strange mixture of fear and anticipation as her identity was confirmed, as officers assured her she was safe now, as the nightmare she had learned to navigate finally crumbled around her. She had survived the unthinkable, not by brute force, but by mental strength, adaptability, and a resilience so deep it carried her through 18 years of captivity. Her reunion with her family was overwhelming. She stepped forward cautiously, seeing the mother whose face she remembered from childhood, but now lined with 18 years of pain and waiting. When they embraced, it wasn't dramatic or loud. It was a release, a connection reforged, a moment that stitched together a wound time alone could not heal. JC held on tightly, feeling the warmth of safety for the first time since she was a child. Even after rescue, the psychological echoes of captivity lingered. Flashbacks crept in unexpectedly, memories resurfaced without warning, and freedom, though beautiful, felt unfamiliar at first. But JC approached healing the same way she approached survival, with quiet strength, patience, and determination. She rebuilt her identity, embraced motherhood in the light instead of darkness, and reclaimed the years that were stolen from her. She refused to be defined by the cruelty she endured. As the world learned her story, people were struck not just by the horror of her captivity, but by the extraordinary resilience she showed in outsmarting the man who controlled her for nearly 2 decades. Her calmness in danger, her ability to read her captor's unstable behavior, and her strategic communication became the very tools that eventually exposed him. She turned survival into a psychological battlefield and won by staying composed even when fear surrounded her.